The new concern trolling for Xbox Game Pass is that the cost of the development of the games being added cannot amount to a sustainable or profitable Game Pass. Now, with all the eloquence in the world, that is what we call horse manure. Now, I got to go ahead and say, I know a lot of the media, or I guess the press, I don't know, a lot of agencies have a problem with the fact that Xbox still exists in gaming. I understand. Many of you think Microsoft, evil big bad corp, they need to go away, right? So that we can have peace and quiet. I understand that might be probably your motivation. In fact, some of you have been actually, accused of self-hatred because you're an American and you hate American corporations. You see them as evil in some way. Now, I am what you call naturalized, like Alexander Hamilton naturalized U.S. citizen. So I've always admired the American ingenuity. So I have a bias, and being, Team America, it's kind of maybe in a sense jaded me. But I can tell you, coming from where I came from, if you were me, you'd like America too. However, me saying that whole thing is a whole bunch of baloney is not just a claim that I'm throwing out in the open or in the ether, simply because if we look at other subscription services like, say, PlayStation Plus. PlayStation Plus also carries PlayStation's first-party games. Now, I know somebody would come and tell me, well, they add their first-party games later on in the service. Got it. And that's true. In fact, Nick McGuire was was interviewed by Steven Totilo, where he said to him that our strategy is to find 3 or 4 third-party day and date launches on our service, and then later on put our games on there. It's a strategy that's working for us. But you cannot tell me that a game like Spider-Man Miles Morales on Extra is not eating into sales. Now, do they add the cost of development of Miles Morales and subtract, do they add that cost into, the cost to run their subscription, or do they subtract the cost from the revenue of PlayStation Plus? They don't. Even you would agree with me that they don't, because, and go ahead and say it, they sold the game. And then after sales had tapered off, I know how you PlayStation fanboys talk, they then put it on the service. Got it. However, when it goes on the service, it's still affecting its potential sales, right? So how do you account for that? Do you then say, well, we have to take the development cost into consideration and subtract it from our subscription cost? You don't do that. So why should Xbox do that? Why? Why should they do that? Because, again, just as you told me just now, the reason PlayStation doesn't do it is because they sell the games, right? Well, the same way Xbox sells its games as well. And now, not only is it selling its games, it's selling them on PlayStation too, which makes it a little bit more interesting. So a game like Doom: The Dark Ages. Oh, wait, look. Doom 3 is on Premium. And the other Doom is on Extra. Oh, my gosh. It even puts them on PlayStation subscription service now that it owns the IP. I'd be dadgummit. It's even getting money from PlayStation's own subscription service. So if Doom: The Dark Ages ever were to go to PS Plus, maybe say 5 years down the line, right? You will realize that you cannot include its cost into Game Pass, simply because that is a nuisance level of concern trolling that even you yourself cannot coherently follow with. Because, again, I understand, like I said, you all think that Microsoft is evil core and whatever it is, and they need to leave gaming, or, maybe they burned you by putting your so-called precious exclusives on PC one day, and so you lost exclusivity, or whatever the heck it is you have as a problem. But you also have to realize that we live in a world where logic and structure are the things that guide us as human beings. The moment we introduce chaos into our world, which is what a lot of the Xbox detractors, in my own opinion, are attempting to do because it's Xbox, thereby giving them a different standard of treatment, you pretty much disappoint the entire order of humanity. I'm not kidding you. Well, but VG, it's just video games. I know. But you got to understand that you got to apply the same, energy, or maintain similar standards when you're talking about two different things. Because what you do is you give PlayStation a pass to do what they want, and they're also a corpo as well who will milk you while you're looking and while you're not looking. In fact, they're depending on you to basically help them with their investor goals. They're going to raise the prices of whatever they're going to raise, just like Xbox would do, to meet whatever financial goals they want to meet. So let me go ahead and probably put the distinctive and ensure that we're, in a sense, encasing or encapsulating this whole conversation. And I think the problem here is day one games, right? Well, already, Xbox's Game Pass subscription service is pretty much in a situation where, as the game launches on Xbox the very first day, it also launches into Game Pass. So it has one subscription option, and it has, at minimum, 2 storefronts that it sells on. You see, PlayStation gamers, I think you've somehow interpreted all of gaming to be centered around your little bubble. But here's the problem with that particular paradigm. The problem with that particular paradigm is that your bubble has not only bust, you are in a position where once the bubble busts, the explosion was so violent, it shreds your clothes. You're naked. Cover yourself. Because the world does not center around you. A game that launches on Game Pass gives the gamers the options to access that game as much as they want. And this is why today we see a game like Forza Horizon 5, even though it launched on Game Pass when it came out, is one of the most successful Xbox launches. And this game was actually carried significantly by both Steam, the Xbox PC app, and then the Xbox storefront. So how would you assess the profit and loss of a game like this, which is now one of the top sellers on PlayStation as well? Won't be surprised if it went to PS Plus and made even more money. How would you then subtract its own development costs from Game Pass without factoring in its own revenue and its profits? You cause a conflation in the accounting, and it no longer makes any sense. Does that make sense? At best, you can take its development cost and subtract it, if you want to do, say, the accounting, from all of Xbox's entire and total revenue, because it's a cost. Yes, you could do that. That's, however you wish to do the accounting. But to say from the subscription service, where millions of people are paying a fee to get in, has to account for this, is a jaded and myopic view in terms of how things should be done. Why? And how we know is because a lot of the people who are claiming this never want to claim the same for PlayStation, who's doing the exact same thing, just delaying it. Because like I said, as we know from single-player games, their value degrades significantly over time. In fact, I don't know if you guys saw it, but the game, Lords of the Fallen, right? Let me show you something very interesting. And this is a third-party game, is now permanently $29. This is from there it is. This is from the Twitter post. I paid full price for this game, right? I paid full price for this game. And this is the creative director, Marek Tyminski from CI Games. He said, Lords of the Fallen is now permanently $29.99. It was $69.99 on console, $59.99 on PC. The game is now in a better state than it was when it launched, right? So the degradation in terms of the cost of the games is something that makes it even much more of a pro-consumer piece, that when you get an Xbox game, you can choose to subscribe or choose to buy the game. And in some cases, a gamer will do both. In fact, in a good number of cases, the gamer will do both because they want to just own the license to the game. Can we acknowledge this and move on from the pedantic, patronizing, constant bickering of, the development costs? Because Christopher Drink, after he actually put that statement out there that all of Xbox's detractors took the bait for, it was y'all he was baiting. Y'all even don't know Christopher Drink. He's playing both sides because he's got to grow. He's got to grow a platform, right? He eventually came out with the clarification that even if we put the development cost in Game Pass, it will still be profitable because it's such a big service and we have a lot of subscribers and a lot of value that makes it so attractive that PlayStation has to copy a piece of it, give them tiers, and then now start adding third-party games day and date to the service. While PlayStation users are now demanding even more. Hey, we'd like to see your first-party games day and date on a subscription because it costs almost as much as Game Pass. See? That's how pro-consumerism works. That's how competition works.